This week, let's see how much this PC costs and let's put one together. Welcome back to Nellie's Nerd Cave, and as I said in the intro, we're building a PC today. I'm not going for a super high spec computer, I'm going for something rather modest. And what we're looking at this week is we're looking at the i5-7600k. This is this particular processor, an 1151. It's 4.2 gigahertz, which is quite snappy for a little i5. It's got a maximum TDP of 91 watts. However, it's only 4 cores and 4 threads. We'll see later on what the benchmarks tell us. Now, with this PC, I'm going to go with the hopefully a budget-friendly model. Like I've said, starting with a 7600k. What we're also looking at as well is some relatively cheap memory. So I'm going with the Corsair Vengeance DDR4. I'm going with 2 sticks here of the 8 gigabytes, giving us a total of 16 gigabytes of RAM here. This runs at 3200 megatransfers a second, is relatively cheap. I got this from my local computer exchange, which is kind of a second-hand shop here in the UK, where you can trade in parts for money, and then they put those parts on for sale. And these were £11 each, so it's £22 for the pair. And they are both a matching pair, which is really, really nice. What I could do, if I really wanted to, is I could bling it up, if I wanted, with a pair of Corsair Vengeance RGB Pros. This is a 32 gigabyte pack, and it has the full RGB on the top, and as well as it being 3600 megahertz, and this type of memory you could put into a case where you have lots of lighting. I might use this, I might change my mind, and I might use this because the case that I'm using today is an MSI MPG mag, and it's just a standard case. It's nothing fancy. However, across the front it has 3 ARGB fans, and it has 1 ARGB fan in the back. And it's a nice case. It's very simple, it's very straightforward, and this one costs around about £74. So what am I pairing this processor and this RAM with? Well, I'm pairing it with this particular motherboard. This is the Asus H110M-A/M.2. Basically, it has an M.2 slot within it. It has 1 PCIe X16 slot, and it has 2 PCI by 1s. This is available on Amazon still, and it's 99 English pounds. It does have a few drawbacks, such as only 2 memory channels, so we can only use 2 sticks of RAM. It doesn't have many fan headers that you can plug many case fans in, so with the 4 that's already in here, I'm going to have to use the hub that's built into here. However, it is USB 3, which is nice to see on a 7th generation processor. And because I mentioned that it was an M.2, I'm going to be using this beautiful little thing, this Micron 512 gigabyte NVMe drive. And this actually cost me £24 from my local computer exchange. It's pretty much okay for what it is. It's doesn't say on here how quickly it goes, but it is Gen 3 by 4, so it should be pretty snappy. We can see that when we do a crystal disk mark later on. With this, I'm also going to be cooling it with the Thermalright Assassin King. This is a 120mm fan. It has 6 heat pipes, and it is a really good fan. This particular fan cost £15.90, and I know what you're all thinking. It's very cheap. It is very cheap. However, I have found when I've been doing benchmarking and I've been taking processors through their paces that this is really good at actually keeping your processor cool. And especially some of these lower end processors like the 7th generation, the heat that it dissipates is fantastic, because this can actually do around about 120 watts. There's 90 watts of TDP there. This should be ample, and it has tested that it is very good at what it does. I could bling this up if I really wanted, and I could put an AIO. I don't think it's necessary for this particular build. The last and final component that I'm going to be using is this. This is the GeForce RTX 3060. This is the Ventus 2, and this has 12 gigabytes of GDDR6. Now, this particular card was £268.99. We could, if we really wanted to, go with a lower spec card, such as the GTX 1650. The GTX 1650 at my local computer exchange was around about £85. That would then reduce the whole cost of this build to around about 400 quid. With this one, it's around about 600. So it depends on what you want. This is a better card for gaming that I found, purely and simply because it has more GDDR RAM. It's got better cooling performance than the 1650. The 1650s that you've seen in my previous videos, like I've said, they're still sold within my local PC world with 13th and 14th generation processors as gaming computers, but they struggle when it comes to anything past 1080p. So I'm going with the RTX 3060 Ventus 2X in this case. The power supply that I'm going to put in this case is by Aerocool, and this is the integrator. This is the Mod XT version, and it's 750 watts, which should be ample to power all these devices. No, it's not in a box. I did buy this brand new. It's semi-modular, and this one actually cost around about £50. Again, a really nice power supply if you want to begin. Now, I would only recommend this if you haven't got a lot of money. It does say it's an 80 plus bronze on the side. However, Aerocool, they normally do fans. I have had this for a couple of years, but it has, and I mean it hasn't at all let me down. It's really good power supply. So we're using this for the build. So those are all my components. Let's get to the build. Okay, so here we are with the build, and here we're going to start first of all with the motherboard. And with the motherboard, we need the processor, and here is our processor. And what we're going to be looking at is the first of all, how this is orientated. So you can see that on the top of the processor there are two little cutouts here, and with these cutouts you've got to match these up with the cutouts on the motherboard. There is normally a little golden triangle, but for these particular 1151s, it's very simple. So we should be able to see that there's some little bits that stick in, and then we have the cutouts on the side, and they fit nicely in. And then you should be able to flip this down, and then there we go. Our processor is now installed. Next, what I like to do is I like to be able to put the hardware in first. So here is the cooling hardware. On the back we put our strain spreader on there, as I like to call it. Basically it spreads out all the bits and pieces so that it's evenly distributes the pressure across the entire processor itself. Then we have some brackets that we can put on, and these go into here like so. Screwdriver, get that in. If he actually gets it in the hole would be good. Yep, good, done that, fab. And it's important that you get this on the correct way, because if you don't, what will happen is the fan and the heatsink won't sit correctly, and you won't get the thermal paste spreading as evenly as you should. And not just that, but the fan and heatsink won't actually be able to screw down properly. So these two little lugs here are the actual things that will line up and align the actual cooler and the base of the cooler with the IHS here on top first. So there we go. That is the heat spreader done. Not heat spreader, sorry. The bracket for the fan and heatsink done. So the next step that I'd like to do before I put the heatsink on is install memory. So I mentioned earlier that I was going to use the LPX, but what I've decided is I'm going to go with the Vengeance Pro RGB, and this is purely and simply so that I can have a bit of RGB in there with the RGB fans. So if we just take this out, nicely packed. It says not being able to get it out. Try open it from the other side, Neil. There you go, well done. And this is just DDR4. I like this because it's a matte black finish and it's very non-intrusive. The only shiny bits are literally the logo and the RGB on top. So again, to make this work, line this up, make sure that the notch is in the correct place, pop it in, and then push down. You can push down quite hard on that and it should just click and it's in. And then the same on the other side, like that. That's that done, so I can get rid of that. The next bit I like to do is I like to put my NVMe in, because once I've got the heatsink in, I won't be able to get to this very easily. So we first of all unscrew this tiny screw at the top. And what we do is we put this in at an angle. We don't put it straight in, we pop it in at an angle, so stood up about 45 degrees. Then we push, and then we can then push it down, and it should sit on that tab very nicely. Then we go in and we put this screw back on. And this is purely and simply to retain that particular drive so that it doesn't actually sit funny or pop out halfway through doing something. Okay. Next, what we can do is we can take our cooler. So like I said, we've got 6 heat pipes that go across the bottom. These are your screws, and you can line this up and screw it down by lining it up on those 2 lugs at the top and then screw it down. However, what I must do first is I must first of all put thermal paste on. Now they say put about a pea size down, and this should be adequate enough. Ooh, this has gone a bit gloopy. Oh, that's fine, that's okay. It's about the size of a pea, and then we can pop this on top, and you'll find that it's pretty cool and okay just to screw down with your fingers to start with, just to get it started. Then you can get your screwdriver in and screw that all the way down. There we go, making sure that we do it on both sides. Just like that, making sure it's nice and tight. Otherwise you'll end up with an air gap, and then you'll end up with overheating CPU. We can then get our cooling fan, and this is the fan that comes with this. Again, it's a nice grey colour. We first of all need to orientate this fan in the correct direction, so the air is coming this way. And what we can do is, I always like to make sure that this is at the bottom of the actual fan, like that. And this comes with these little, they look like silly little clips that are going to be really difficult to get on. They're not that difficult, so what we can do is you can actually get these started by putting them on the back first, on both sides, like so. Then we can clip one on one side, and then we can literally clip the other just like that on the other side. It's as if it actually does it. There we go. And what I like to do before I plug this in is I like to be able to tie a little knot in there. Not tie it tight, just enough That way it keeps it cleaner, so no knot, it's very dangly, it can get everywhere. Tie the little knot inside like this, and then what you can do is this plug will then fit here on the fan header, just like that, and that's it, we're all done. We're all in, we're all complete as far as the fans are concerned. Just double check that one because it felt very loose. That is your motherboard done and ready to go into the case. Okay, so next is the case. Here we have a standard RTX case. It does have at the bottom here, it does have a little place for you to put your power supply, which we'll get back to later. All motherboards generally come with your I/O shield. A good thing to remember about your I/O shield is to make sure that to get it the right way around, if you've got the 3 holes at the bottom for your sound line in a microphone, these are here right at the bottom, they face the bottom. So what you can then do is you then look for where it actually fits, which is in the side here, and you then need to be able to get this in and make sure that you've pushed it all the way in until it properly clicks in. And you should be able to see that it's nice and flush with the bottom or the side of the case once you've done that. I always like to make sure that I've kind of cable managed parts of this case already, so things such as the cabling in the back that comes from the front panel, make sure it's in the right places. We can then take our motherboard, and what we can then do is at a slight tilted angle towards the back, we can tilt it there towards the back, make sure it fits within the I/O shield, and then drop it down. And you should be able to see that you have the screw holes all lined up, ready for you to put in all the relevant screws. Now the screws that you need, there are generally 2 different types of screw. So you've got one with a coarse thread, and you have one with a fine thread. The ones for this particular board have a fine thread that hold it down. These coarse ones are generally for your power supplies. So we can then take our threaded screws and we can put them in the holes. We can screw them all in, just like so. I like to back the screws off slightly once I first pop them in the holes, basically just so that you know that they actually sit in there flush and they sit nicely within the threads, so that you don't cross thread them, so that when you come to actually unscrewing this and using this board again, you can actually get the screws out without taking these standoffs with it. Okay, so you should have 6 in total. There's one that I am going to probably need a longer screwdriver for, because it's right at the back at the very top. There we go, that one's in. Fabulous. Now I'm not too bothered about that top one at this present moment. It's good practice to put them all in, but I will be dismantling this virtually straight away as soon as I've done. So therefore it's of no consequence at this time. So now I've completed this, what we're now going to be looking at is, I tend to go straight for the front panel connectors. So with the front panel connectors, you can see that you have HD audio, and this one is the one that you use for your audio. You then look for the relevant port over here. We can also see that there is a pin that is covered, so you can't get this wrong at all. There's a pin covered, which means it only goes in one place, and that's here. Just push it on, it's done. Tuck that cable back in. You then have the next one, which is a USB. This is for your USB 2 ports, and again this one has a pin covered. It's a different pin covering to the one that we've just plugged in, so again you can't get it in the wrong place. And this is going into this particular one here, it says. Yep, I did put it in the right way. Excellent. It's just not going on. There we go, that's better. Then what we do is we look for the switches and all the other bits that we might need. So we have a power switch, a reset switch, a hard drive LED, and then your power LED. So this one, you have your power LED at the top, hard drive LED at the bottom, you have your reset switch at the bottom and your power switch at the top. So you can literally find reset switch, power switch, reset switch at the bottom, just here, and the power switch at the top, like that. See, those two don't matter which way around you go. However, with the power, you need to make sure you've got your LEDs in the correct one. And one of these has a plus on it, and the other one has a negative. And again, you also have a positive and a negative on the hard drive LEDs. So again, we look for the positive and negative LEDs, and my eyes do not work, so it goes in that way around. It says not plugging it in properly because your fingers were in the way and you couldn't see what you were doing, even though you have glasses on. There we go. And then the same with this one. This one goes behind there. Oh, it says even still not plugging it in properly. There we go. And that's our LEDs for the front. It's also the switches, the power switch, the reset switch, etc. We do have one more cable that we can plug in here, and this is the USB 3 cable. And this USB 3 cable, again, is notched here. So you have a sticky outy bit, and then you have a notch that's cut out of the board at the bottom. You can then tease the cables and bend them around a little bit, and then we can pop it in like that. USB 3 nicely completed. Now what we can do is we can go to the back of the case. And we go to the back of the case for a few reasons. One is power supply. All right, so don't generally look nice, don't these things? Okay, but take off that, just like so. And you can see that you have a basement at the bottom here. And this basement will allow us to be able to set our power supply in there. We have some cables for various things, such as the LEDs. This is a controller for the fans and the LEDs, which is fine. We may have hard drives that we want to put in down here. For our purposes, we don't really need a hard drive because we've got the NVMe. You'll notice that at the bottom there's a grill, and your fan can actually sit on the top of the grill, and we can pop it in just like this. And then we can get our coarse threaded screws, and we can line up our power supply and screw it in. And this should take 4 screws to do, which shouldn't take as long as screwing in 6 screws, he says. So there we go, all 4 screws. 1 power supply installed. I make it look easy, I know. So with the power supply, we have specific cables that need to go in specific places. So that can go, where does that need to go? Where do you need to go? Okay, so you are a fan connector. I don't need this, that's fine. But I do need fan hub connectors, etc. Okay, so we have 3 main connectors. Okay, we have our so we have our EPS power connectors. This needs to always go in the top, like so. And I like to just pop it like that. We then have our 24-pin ATX connector. I can see my ATX connectors about here, so I can literally move that in here so that it's ready for me to plug in the front. And then this one is a 6+2, so you've got 6 pins plus 2 pins for bigger graphics cards, or it's just one big 8-pin connector, which is either is fine. This is for my graphics card, so again I need to make sure I've got space for that, and that goes here. All the other bits, I have some SATA connectors, and these are all for supplementary power for other things, so I can literally take a SATA connector and connect these up like so. If I put them in the right way. What we can now do is potentially put the back on, but there's no point putting the back on because sometimes things go wrong and you need to get back into the case. So what I tend to do is just flip the case back over. I look for my EPS supplementary power, and I look for the plug, which is down here, and then I plug in my 12-volt ATX power supply. So this is just a fan connector. The only other fan connector that is in here is right at the very back, right down here, right next to my power for other things. So this is the disadvantage with this board particularly, and that is because I've now got a cable running across here. It doesn't look very nice. However, if I kind of tuck it in neatly, it looks better than it did. The next cable I need is my 24-pin power connector, and this goes in this big slot here, and this is generally very easy to plug in, just like that. It's done. And finally, what we've got left to complete is our graphics card. We first of all take this, we line it up with my case, and we then pop it into here like so. He says, there we go. You can hear it click. Then we get our 6+2. We make sure it's orientated in the correct way, and we can then bend the cabling as we need it. We can then add this to our power side like so. That's it. We plug it in. We make sure that is well and truly in the slot because we don't want any short circuits or anything like that. That can stay as it is. That's fine. And that should be our computer ready to boot and ready to switch on. So let's find out if this actually functions. Okay, so completed computer. Let's see if this thing switches on. If I can remember where the power switch is. As always, I forget. There's a switch around the back. Let's first of all flip that, and it's a good sign that we have the networking light on. And let's flick the switch. We have LEDs. We have LEDs on our RAM, which is good, and that shows that we're actually up and running. And if we look back here, we have a post screen, and that is saying to us that we're actually booted, and it should boot directly into Windows. It's telling us there's a new CPU. There we go, booting into Windows. So let's have a look and do some bench tests and see how this performs. So let's have a go. Let's get it working, and after a few seconds we should be able to increase our temperatures, which we are doing hopefully, and then it should play and load this CPU up, and we can see there that it's running a 1 hour benchmark on this, and we can see that our temperatures of our CPU is 53, 54. We've had a high of 55 here. So it's looking very good. We've got good thermals. With the OCCT, we can actually look at other things, such as the frequencies that it's running at. We can also look at the voltages, and we can also look at the power of the CPU that it's running at. So you can see there it's running at 47 watts. And let's have a look, see if this does it. Yep, it does actually say it's running at about 57 here, 55, 56. There we go. And it does match, which is good. Let us see what Cinebench R23 says. So what we'll do is we'll start this, and it's saying we should be around 33, 32. So let's start a multi-core one. So there we have it, a Cinebench R23 result of 3472 with multi-core processing. So let's have a look at a game, for example. Okay, so in Doom Eternal, one of my favourite games, I'm just going to continue with a mission, and we'll see what frames we get. Now, I don't think that my monitor is set correctly, so let's leave that and go to my display settings and just check, because this is a 144Hz monitor. Yes, it's only on 60, so let's change that to 145Hz. Keep the changes, go back to Doom, that's better. 144 FPS, much better. So, as we can see, we've got some great effects. We can see that we've got some nice reflections here, and we've got some great flame effects. The contrast looks really nice. You're probably not seeing this due to the capture. So let's go for it. Oops, being dead, never mind. And that health, let's have a go. Let's go kicking some butt. Kill the big guy. Get some more ammunition. We'll wander around. Yeah, we're getting a nice consistent frame rate, which is good. And then I died. Well, hey ho. But you can see that we're not really taxing the CPU at all. We're on 75% usage. It's got a nice temperature of 45 degrees or so. The GPU again is kind of limited by what it can send to the CPU, which is quite slow, so you tend to find that the GPU hits 100% at times, but its temperatures are really good, and for 1080p gaming this is fantastic. Okay, so there you go, a full PC build. This has cost 598 English pounds. It's a relatively straightforward mid-range-ish PC. It does play games very well on 1080p, and a lot of the settings that I had were high. You could see from Doom Eternal that we were getting some really good frame rates of around about 90 to 120 frames per second, and that's really, really nice. If you want to build one of these machines, it's very good as an entry-level computer. There are places you can go with this. Now, I had maxed out the amount of RAM it had with 32 gigs, but you could upgrade this to the i7, the 7700k, if you wish, for a better processor. That would then be 4 cores, 8 threads, giving you much more performance. You could quite easily put a lower spec graphics card in if you want to spend less money. but I think this is quite a nice setup just as it is. So if you've enjoyed this video and you like what I've done, please don't forget to like and subscribe by clicking the button below. And if you'd like to support what I do, please buy me a coffee and follow the links below. And I shall see you all next time.